Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Emma Curvin. I'm a bodybuilder. I'm an online fitness coach. I'm the whole online fitness coach slash bodybuilder stereotype person who only is interested in the gym and training. And today I'm here to talk to you about most girls' favorite topic. Okay, today we are going to be talking all about the glutes, the booty, the moneymaker, the thing that has so many different names, the thing that is sung about in so many different rap songs. And I'm going to talk to you today about why your glutes haven't been growing and what you can do to fix it. So I'm excited for this to be just more of a sit down, chatty video, informative video, because this is my thing. I love talking about all this sort of stuff. For anybody who doesn't know, I'm a former natural figure competitor. I'm moving into the wellness division. I'm not going to say that my glutes are amazing because they definitely still need to be like at least triple the size that they are now, but I have worked so hard over these last 2 to 3 years on building my glutes, on learning as much as I possibly could about this wonderful part of, I was about to say the female anatomy. Everybody has glutes. So listen, you could be watching this and you might be a man and maybe you're interested in growing your own glutes. Maybe you're a coach who coaches females. You want to teach them how they can grow their glutes. Either way, I don't really care. Welcome. And before we do get into the video, of course, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. It really means the world to me. I'm on the road. I want to get to 1,000 subscribers. That would really be like the best feeling ever. And of course, give it a like, give it a comment, give it a share, all of that good stuff. If you do find this useful, I would really, really, really appreciate it, please. So let's dive in. Let's dive into this amazing topic, because if I had €1, if I had €1 for every single time a client came to me and was like, Emma, I want to grow my glutes, I wouldn't even need to take clients. I'd be so rich, maybe. And it's a question I get a lot on Instagram, in podcasts and stuff, like, how do I grow them? Because let's be real, guys, there is so much information out there, and I'm going to say it now, there's so much bullshit information out there about this is the best exercise for your glutes, or I started doing this and suddenly my shelf grew. And today I want to break down why statements like that are false. I'm going to explain to you about like the anatomy of the glutes, how they work, how they function, and how, because of understanding those things, we can then optimally target them within our training, and then everything else that we need to do to ensure that we are growing and building muscle, because it's not as simple as having the best program. There's so much more that goes into it. There's your intensity, there's your volume, there's your sleep, there's your recovery, there's your food. It's a lot. And I'm hoping that you're going to come away from this video going, yeah, do you know what? I can now critically evaluate a program that I see, or a video that I see, or a statement that I see, and understand whether or not it's true or it's false, or it's a good program. I can understand what I've maybe been doing wrong, why I haven't, grown a certain body part. And I'm obviously talking about the glutes mostly in this video because who doesn't love glutes? I know I do. But a lot of what I'm going to say is going to apply to basically most body parts. Just the anatomy and the function part is going to be specific to the glutes, but everything else, you can take that away and apply to training all of your body parts. And if you do, and if you apply what you learn in this video, you are going to have a massive badonkadonk in a year. Okay, you can come back to me and let me know, but most of your body parts will probably have improved. Before we dive into why your glutes haven't been growing, I want to start with just talking about the glutes in general as a muscle group, because when we understand a muscle's structure and function, we can then understand how we should be training it in order to grow it. Understanding the function is also just going to help you understand why you would pick certain exercises, why you would structure workouts in a certain way, why you might not have, two specific exercises in the same workout, just things like this. So I think having this understanding is going to give you a lens through which you can, like I said, critically evaluate programs and understand why you might train in a certain way. So when we think about the glutes, there are actually 3 glute muscles. There's the glute minimus, the glute medius, and the glute maximus, which I'm sure you probably know, but still we are going back to basics here because I want you to know all of it. I'm going to have diagrams and shit on the screen so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So let's start with the glute max, because this is the largest of the 3. This is the part of the glutes that's going to give your bum that sort of roundness and shape. And when we look at the glute max, there's actually 2 subdivisions. So there's the upper and the lower glute max. The glute max is the most superficial layer. So it's the layer that sits on top. And this then covers the glute medius, which sits underneath. The muscle fibers of the glute max attach to the hip and the pelvis bone, and they then run down to meet the top of the thigh bone, which is called the femur. Fibers of the glute max also attach to structures around the lats and the erectors, so that's like your lower back. And so because of this, because it's basically attaching to muscles on your back and then also on your leg, the glute max is really responsible for a lot of movement throughout the entire body. And when we look at how the glute max functions, which is important to understand why we would train it in certain ways, one of the primary functions of the glute max is hip flexion and hip extension. So hip flexion is basically any movement where the angle at your hip is getting smaller. So think about when you're doing a hinge, okay? You're bending over and that angle at that hip is getting smaller. Same with a squat. When you're at the bottom of a squat, think about how small the angle of the hip is there. That's hip flexion. And then hip extension is basically straightening your hip. So think about when you come up to the top of a hip thrust, your hip is now straight. Then the glute max also is responsible for moving the leg away from the body. So this would be hip abduction. And it's going to stabilize the hip when it's in that abducted position away from your body. And so now that you understand the glute max, how it functions, what it does, I want to just briefly talk about what we're trying to achieve when the goal is to grow any muscle, okay? So when we're trying to train in order to elicit muscular hypertrophy, we are essentially trying to take a muscle through its range of motion as it carries out its function, exposing it to mechanical tension close to the point of muscular failure. So I'm just going to break that down for you. When we are, lifting any weight, what we are doing is we're driving tension to the muscle fibers. So the muscle fibers are having to contract in order to resist that tension. We then want to move the muscle through its full range of motion or its safe range of motion. So think about doing a squat. We don't want to just do like a half squat. We want to come down as far as possible to get that muscle coming into its full range of motion, into its lengthened position, and then coming back up to its shortened position. We want to do that to the point that we get towards muscular failure, because we know from the research it's the 2 to 3 reps all the way up to that final rep before failure that is going to be the most stimulating for muscle protein synthesis. That's basically the signal for your body to go, okay, shit, you've been exposed to something really difficult and challenging. You should probably grow and get bigger in case you're ever challenged with this again. So we basically expose our muscle fibers to this mechanical tension close to failure, and that acts as that signal that they need to adapt, recover, and grow. And this is what, over time, when we do it again and again and again under certain conditions, is going to drive muscle hypertrophy, muscle growth, you getting bigger. That's obviously a very simplified explanation of how this whole process works. Like, there's way more that goes into it, but I just want you to understand the basics so that you know when you're training why you should be lifting certain loads, doing certain exercises, and pushing yourself as hard as you need to be pushing yourself. And a concept that's really important to remember when you are training is the path of least resistance. So our bodies and our brains are kind of lazy, and if they can get away with doing the least amount of work possible in order to complete a task, they will do that. This probably applies to you when you're just procrastinating and doing stuff, but it also applies to your body when you're trying to lift certain weights. So you want to think your body is going to recruit the least amount of muscle fibers it possibly can in order to lift a weight. So if you're lifting quite a light load that's not challenging, your body is not going to recruit a lot of muscle fibers. It's going to recruit the least amount of muscle fibers that it can get away with in order to complete that rep and lift that load. So if we want to recruit all the muscle fibers, which that is the goal, right? If we want to get that muscle close to failure, we need to be recruiting all the muscle fibers under tension. You need to be lifting adequately heavy loads. It doesn't mean you just have to lift as heavy as possible. That's not true, but you definitely need to be challenging yourself and like lifting heavy enough, right? And girls, I'm going to say it now. You are stronger than you fucking think. And if there's one thing that I see with clients and with just people in the gym in general, is they just don't lift heavy enough and they don't train hard enough. And I'm definitely going to talk about that in this video. But like, the people you see with massive glutes and massive legs, aside from the genetic freaks, they're also probably training like fucking animals. Like, it takes a different level of intensity to really grow crazy legs and crazy glutes. So we essentially want to expose the fibers of the different portions of our glutes to mechanical tension as they carry out their function and as we take them close to mechanical failure. Do this over time, we're going to elicit muscle growth. So like I said, with the glute max, that's hip extension and hip flexion and potentially some hip abduction as well. So like I said, the glute max has upper and lower divisions, and different movement patterns in the gym are going to target those different divisions slightly differently. So we want to make sure that we're training through both hip flexion and hip extension to target the entire glute max. So what are hip flexion exercises? This is anything that is most challenging when the hip is in that closed, smaller angle position. So think squats, leg presses, lunges, step ups, split squats, Romanian deadlifts, B stance, RDLs, conventional deadlifts, any movement where it is most challenging when your glute is stretched and lengthened, that is a hip flexion exercise. Then when we look at hip extension exercises, these are exercises that are hardest when the glute is contracted and squeezed. So the main ones are going to be hip thrusts, kickbacks, 45-degree hyperextensions, glute drives, anything like this where it's really hard to get your hip extended and straight and squeeze those glutes. That's a hip extension exercise. Again, anything where you're pushing those hips forward, hip extension. So if you want to train the glute max, you want to be taking exercises from these different categories: hip extension, hip flexion. With hip extension, I would almost break it into squat movements and then hinge movements. So again, the squats, leg presses, lunges, step ups, and then hinges, which is like your RDLs, your B stance RDLs, and things like that. Like I said, the glute max and also the glute medius are responsible for training hip abduction and for stabilizing the hip when it's in that abducted position. So things like kickbacks, where you're kicking kind of more to the side, as well as the hip abductor, these are going to train that muscle. With the glute medius, a really great movement, or any movement that's going to really be beneficial for it, is anything that's contralaterally loaded. So for example, I love a Bulgarian split squat where it's contralaterally loaded. So I'm holding the weight in the opposite hand to the working leg. So I have my left foot forward, holding the weight in my right hand. The reason this is so good for the glute med is because you're holding the weight in your right hand, it's going to be pulling you towards that. And obviously we don't want to fall over, we don't want to tip over. So in order to stop us, to resist that force, the glute med has to work really hard to stabilize the hip in that position. So that's why I love a contralaterally loaded split squat, front foot elevated split squat. Even walking lunges can work really well for this as well. It's not quite the same, but you're still getting that pull over that you have to resist with the glute med. Really great exercises, and I would probably say they should make up a lot of your programming versus just things like the abductor machine, which I've come to like, but it's not quite the same as those heavier movements. I do think the real bread and butter when it comes to programming for your glutes is going to be the hip flexion and the hip extension exercises, and anything where you can expose your glutes to quite a lot of load, because you have to understand that glutes are big, they can lift a lot of weight. So if most of your programming is like little baby movements like abductors and kickbacks, I don't think you're going to get the most bang for your buck, but you should have a nice mix of the two. The glute minimus, I haven't really spoken about this. Honestly, it's such a deep muscle like within your body. It's really, we're not really training it in any exercises, and also you can't see it anyway, so I wouldn't be wasting your time. It has more so stabilization functions, whereas the glute max, the glute med, these are the muscles that you actually see when you look at somebody. Like, you can't see somebody's glute minimus. Nobody's looking at you being like, oh my god, her glute minimus is so good. That's not a thing. Now, something that I do just want to talk about before we dive into like the mistakes you potentially make with your glute training is genetics, okay? This is so important, and this is something that I think not a lot of people understand, because the people who have amazing glutes and who are selling you glute programs, they're not going to tell you, yeah, but I look like this because my genetics are amazing. And I'm not saying they don't work hard, but they also have crazy genetics. All you have to do is look at the Brazilians, right? Those girls, genetics for glutes, incredible, right? And that's just the way the cookie crumbles. Even when it comes to building muscle, your propensity to build muscle is very genetically driven. I know I build muscle quite well. There's some people who build muscle way better than me. And unfortunately, there's some people who have to work so fucking hard to build any sort of muscle. And that is something that you can't change. It's out of your control. What's in your control is how hard you work and the effort you put in. That is always in your control. But unfortunately, if you get down because you look at other people who look a certain way, it's something that you cannot change, right? Again, you can change how hard you work, you can change how you train, the effort you put in. I truly believe everybody can grow good glutes if they understand how to train them, but they're never going to look like anybody else. Even the shape of them is never going to look like anybody else. So when you're looking at other people, try not to obsess over their anatomy or how they look. Instead, look at how they're training and see if you can apply some of that to what you do. Again, the shape and structure of your pelvis, your actual hip bone. Some people just have, you know, the girls who have the big wide hips, that's their bone. Some people just have narrower boned hips, you know, they don't have the big childbearing hips. And just having that alone, again, is going to make your glutes look bigger because the muscle is going to have to be wider to account for the fact that the pelvis is wider. Even the way that then you can train because of how your pelvis is oriented, these things are all going to affect how the glutes ultimately look. If you're someone who just has a smaller pelvis, you might just have boxier looking glutes, and again, there's not really too much that you can do about that. You can just build them, you can grow them, but there's nothing you can do to change the actual, you know, insertions. And again, that's another big one. So I see so many girls, I see so many TikToks saying things like, this is the ultimate shelf exercise, or I grew my shelf doing this. And look, the glute medius is what we're referring to when we talk about the shelf. Can you train the glute medius? Of course you can, okay? It's quite hard to completely isolate, but you can train it. However, where that muscle inserts on your body, you can't change that. I personally don't have the highest inserting glute medius. So even though I have built that muscle, it's never going to sit super high on my body, and I'm never going to have that crazy shelf. Unfortunately, it's just how it is, right? I'm still trying to grow and trying to build it, but there's like, I can't make the muscle, I can't take the muscle and pull it up and make it attach further up onto my pelvis. Like, it's just, I can't do it. It's not possible. So yeah, when you see people saying stuff like that, just be mindful, okay, of what they're saying. And, you know, sometimes I don't think they really understand what the difference is between how big a muscle is and where a muscle inserts. And again, muscle insertions, completely genetic. Where your muscles insert on your biceps, on your quads, there's nothing that you can do to change that. You can just grow the muscle that you already have. Also, we have to talk about fat storage before we get really into this, because some girls are blessed. Some girls are blessed, okay? They genetically have tiny waists, lean abs, and fat asses. I'm so happy for them. I really am. Would I have that? Would I like that if I could have it? Of course. Unfortunately, I store my fat in my midsection, and I'm sitting with fucking lines in my glute ham tie-in at 164 pounds. Make it make sense, but then I also have the advantage. It's pretty easy for me to get my glutes lean, right? But you know, I've seen a lot of fitness influencers, and they've looked the exact same for 4 or 5 years. They've trained the exact same for 4 or 5 years, and they just are so blessed with their genetics and how they store fat, and they've been able to make money off of that. Again, I'm so happy for them. That's great. But you have to understand, when those people are putting out information, look at it with a critical eye. If someone's been lifting the same weights for 5 years, they're not growing anything. They just look like that. They just look like that. And again, I'm really happy for them. If I could make money that way too, I probably would. But unfortunately, I'm the one who has to actually like work really hard to grow these things. And when you're looking at people and who to get information from, look at the person who wasn't genetically blessed but made improvements. Look at the person who's been training differently, training heavier, training harder, putting the effort in to actually learn how to train. They're probably the people you want to listen to, not the people who just genetically have the great body part, because they could do anything and they'd probably look amazing. So I say all of that just because I used to be the person who got super down about the fact that I didn't look a certain way, or my glutes didn't look a certain way. And so much of the things that I was fixating on are just out of my control. How I store my fat, how my glutes insert, the shape of my pelvis. I want you instead to focus on what you can control, okay? Because what you can control is how you train, the intensity at which you train, your sleep, your nutrition, your recovery. These are all things that are within your control and that you can change. And like I said, I do believe most people can see huge improvements in their glutes and any body part if they take the time and are patient. You're not going to grow a massive ass in 12 weeks. Stop thinking that you are. It's not going to happen. Unfortunately, even if you take a shitload of performance enhancing drugs, I'm telling you now, they don't work that quickly, okay? So be patient and focus on the things that you can control instead of looking at other people and just beating yourself up because you don't look like them. Life is too short for that, babes. It really is. Okay, now we know a bit more about the glutes, their functions, how they work, why certain exercises might be picked. Let's get into some of the mistakes that you might be making when it comes to growing your glutes and what you can then do to fix it, because obviously that's what I'm here for, is to help you fix it. So problem number 1 is really just your programming sucks. I'm not going to do a big deep dive into what makes an effective training program. If that's a video that you want me to make, I can, but we would literally that would be a 5-part video because there's a lot that goes into it. But the main things that we would want to be looking at when it comes to your programming for training your glutes is your frequency, your volume, and your exercise selection. So if you are just getting into this, I would recommend starting training your legs and your glutes twice a week. That's plenty if you are just beginning, and then you can build up from there. I know I train glutes 4 days a week, basically 3 to 4 days a week, but I've also been training for 10 years and I trained glutes twice a week for a long time. Then I moved up to 3 days a week. Now I do 4 days a week. I'm also, I'm an assisted athlete. My ability to recover is probably higher than a lot of other people's. If I was completely natty, there's no way I could do this. It would be impossible. I would never be able to train this way. But I see girls sometimes and they want to rush into doing 3 or 4 leg days a week, but they don't even have the ability to train properly or train with high intensity yet. Take your time to develop those skills first. Be able to take your sets close to failure. Have really good form at the exercises that you're doing. If you can do that twice a week, you will see massive improvements for quite a long time. And then if you start to plateau, then you can increase up to potentially 3 days a week. I would rather see someone do 2 really good lower body days where they hit all of those exercises that they need to be hitting with high intensity and good form, rather than doing just loads of junk volume and shitty exercises across 3 days a week because they feel like they need to. Because again, you're not actually going to get a lot from those, but you're just going to become really fatigued, and again, you could even injure yourself in the long run, and that's just something that we want to avoid. When it comes to training volume, this is one that is very individual. By training volume, I mean direct number of working sets per week that you are doing per body part. We know from the literature, anything from about 8 to 20 sets a week is the sweet spot, and again, very person dependent. I find females tend to be able to recover from higher volumes than males, probably because we have higher amounts of estrogen. When I say I find, I mean the literature finds. I'm not the researcher. This is just what I have read. But even, I have girls that can train and recover from higher volumes. I know I can. And it's just I think our genetic makeup and how we are made. Also, I just think men are pussies. We're harder. Sorry, guys. But about 8 to 20 sets per week. Now, where should you start? Probably between 8 and 15, and then titrate up from there. If you feel like you're recovering well, you can add an extra set or 2. You don't need to be doing 30 to 40 sets of glutes a week to start. Again, if you're doing 30 to 40 sets of glutes per week, you are potentially not training with anywhere near enough intensity. And I'm going to talk about intensity later, but this just means how hard you're training. When we look at training volume, there is a bit of a law of diminishing returns. So we know that as you increase training volume, you increase gains, you get stronger, you get bigger. But after a certain point, when you're doing too much volume, that adaptation actually starts to go down, and now you don't adapt as well and you actually regress. It's an inverted U. So you want to get to the point where you're recovering really, really well, but you're training hard and you're adapting before you overdo it, and then you're just not making any progress. So look at your volume, look at your frequency, and then the next thing is exercise selection. Okay, so this is so important because sometimes I get programs from people, whether they're programs that they've written for themselves or from a coach that they've had, and I just look at it and think, what the actual fuck is going on here? Because in the same session, they might have a Bulgarian split squat and then walking lunges and then a Romanian deadlift and a B-stance RDL. And I'm just thinking, why do you have all these redundant exercises? You have the same exercise, basically the same movement pattern in there 2 or 3 times, when you would be better off picking one of those movement patterns and just doing that with really high quality sets close to failure. So let's bring it back to the function of the glutes. Hip extension, hip flexion, and hip abduction. Okay, these would be the main movement patterns. Now, when it comes into exercise patterns, I break that up further. Hip flexion, which is hip flexions that are squats, hip flexion that are hinges, hip extension, that's your hip thrust, etc., and then your hip abduction. So these are really the 4 main categories that you want to be looking at when it comes to creating your training programs. And I would always recommend pick one from each category for your session. So I'm going to write a list. I think I'm going to try and write a list somewhere on the screen of the different categories and the different exercises that would fall into that category. So at some point you can screenshot that, and hopefully you'll be able to kind of see what you should be picking. And then that should give you an idea when you look at programs that you maybe had before, Is there redundant exercises? Are you just doing the same movement pattern 3 or 4 times with loads of high volume and then ignoring other movement patterns? I used to be the person that just did fucking hip thrusts, fiber extensions, kickbacks, because I thought you had to squeeze the glute to get it to grow. Whereas we now know you really want to be spending more of your time doing those lengthened range exercises like your hip extensions, okay? So your hinges and your squats. Those are really going to be the ones that are making up the bread and butter of that program, and that you should be focusing a lot on and getting a lot of load through the glutes in that stretched, lengthened position. Now, there is nuance to this. It's not as simple as one exercise is the exact same as another. Different exercises, different setups, using different attachments or dumbbells, barbells, Smith machines, cables. These are all going to influence how you feel that muscle and also the specific fibers of the muscle that are targeted. Again, I'm not going to spend this entire video going through each and every single glute exercise. Maybe that would be a good video, rating my top glute exercises. But either way, you have to basically you have to find which ones work for you best, okay? Which ones do you connect the best with? Which ones can you progress for as long as possible? Give yourself time as well. If you start a new exercise, give yourself a few weeks to figure out how to set it up properly. But you want to be taking the time to find those core movements that you get on the best with, right? Because then you can just stick with those. For example, I love a Bulgarian split squat. I love B stance RDLs. I love a Smith machine RDL. I don't like a barbell RDL. It doesn't suit me at all. Don't really like a just standard back squat or, you know, a bilateral squat. I always would rather have a unilateral squat. You know, there's things like that that just suit me better, but that's because of my anatomy, my mechanics, and my preferences as well. But what I would say is look at the different categories and pick maybe 2 exercises from each category, and then do one on one day and do one on the other day. It's that simple. So within a session, have your squat movement. It can either be bilateral or unilateral, okay? Maybe one day you do bilateral, the other day you do unilateral. So that means both legs and then one leg. Do your hinge movement. Again, one day could be a really big hinge, like a conventional deadlift or a Romanian deadlift. The next day you might do something like a B stance RDL. I love those. Then you also want to have a hip extension exercise. So that could be kickbacks, glute drives, and then an abduction exercise. So that might be a actual hip abductor or an abduction kind of a kickback. But have one from each category in your session. That is as simple as it has to be. That's as simple as your program has to be. Find the ones that connect well with, find the amount of volume you can recover from, and find the ability to take those close to failure. If you do that, I guarantee you will have massive glutes. You don't need to be doing 8-9 exercises per workout, 5-6 sets per exercise. It's honestly, it's madness, okay? It's madness. If that's how you want to, if you want to train your glutes, keep it simple, keep it basic, and just learn how to train fucking hard. And I swear to God, they will grow like weeds. And again, just make sure you are including every category. You want a well-rounded program. You don't just want to have just all hip thrusts. It should be a variety of exercises to train the glutes through its various ranges of motion, through its various functions as well, okay? And just don't get carried away with the really crazy, weird, intricate looking exercises that you see on the internet. The basics work. Honestly, if you saw my program and the stuff I do, there might be 1 or 2 exercises that are a bit different, but honestly, it's the basics repeated over and over and over again. So just make sure your programming doesn't suck if you actually want to have a good pair of glutes. The next problem is your execution is probably just really shitty. So you can have the best program in the world. It can be perfectly laid out, perfect volume, perfect frequency, perfect exercise selection for you. But if you're not actually performing that program well, it does not matter. You need to make sure that you are working the actual muscle correctly. And this is where I always recommend, if you don't have a coach, film yourself. Film yourself and compare what you do to what, maybe somebody that you know is a trustworthy person. See how they are training. Does your exercise look similar to theirs? Obviously, we have to account for inter-individual differences, okay? Different mechanics, anatomy, but does your set look similar in terms of tempo, in terms of intensity, in terms of setup? Or are you really rushing your reps? Are you just dropping into the bottom, coming back up super quickly, using loads of momentum, doing half reps? Are you 10 reps away from failure? The only way you can really see this is if you film yourself. You would be amazed at how often, even I do this. I finish a set and think, yeah, that was hard. And then I look back and I'm like, oh dear, I probably had 2 or 3 more there. And then I get pissed off at myself. So you need to make sure that you're evaluating what you're doing. And if you have a coach and you are not sending them training videos, you are not getting the most from them. Send them training videos. I always tell my clients, send me as many training videos as you want, because I want people to get the most from their program. And the execution and the quality of those reps is so important. And you have to remember, training is a skill. So the more and more you do certain exercises, the better and better you get at coordinating the exercise, at signaling from your brain down to your muscle to do that exercise properly. So firstly, you need to give yourself time. If you do an exercise once and say, I can't do this, it's not any good, no, be patient, okay? It might, like, I've been doing exercises and honestly, it might be 3 months and suddenly I'm like, oh my God, it clicks. It just clicks now. Something makes sense. And then I connect really well with it. So you have to be patient and take the time to develop your execution and to take that time to improve the skill at all of those exercises that you're doing. But film yourself. Watch your sets back. Film your warm-up sets. See if they're looking okay. Evaluate things like I said, range of motion, tempo, intensity. And when we think about execution, my main things that I'm looking at there are, like I said, how you're setting up the exercise in the first place, the control you have of it. You know, are you letting gravity do the work? Are you just dropping weights down? You know, are you just falling into the bottom of a squat? Or are you actively resisting that weight on the way down? Are you being like slow and controlled? Your first rep and your last rep should be the exact same, except that last rep should have slowed down involuntarily. You should be fighting and be unable to maintain that rep speed. This is how we know we're getting close to failure. So just actually look at your training and evaluate, is the execution any good? Because like I said, perfect program on paper means fucking nothing if you are not executing it properly. And connected to that is problem number 3 as to why your glutes probably haven't grown. It's probably because you just train like a pussy, okay? I'm sorry. I was about to say I'm going to get demonetized. No monetization is coming through my YouTube right now. But either way, most people just don't train hard enough. They have no idea how to really push themselves. And like I said at the start, if you want to have really big glutes and legs, you have to learn to train like an animal. Like, not to be dramatic, but you should be going into that gym fighting some fucking demons. Okay? Like, the level of intensity it takes to really grow crazy legs, it's scary. Like, honestly, to a degree, I get anxious going into trained legs. I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake, this is going to be so difficult, right? And that's what is required. Unfortunately. Something you need to remember about building muscle is your body doesn't want to do it. Funny enough, your body wants to stay the same. It loves homeostasis. So if you want to grow and you want to build muscle, you have to give it a reason to do that. And your training has to be so hard and so challenging so that it basically tells your body like, bro, you need to grow and you need to get bigger. If you want to grow, you have to be continually exposing your body to greater and greater and greater amounts of mechanical tension. This is kind of linked to progressive overload. So you might have heard people say that progressive overload builds muscle. That's not true. Progressive tension builds muscle. Exposing your body and your muscle fibers to greater amounts of mechanical tension builds muscle. Now, we expose it to more mechanical tension by doing more weight, more reps, but it's not the progressive overload that's causing the growth. It's the progressive tension that is causing the growth and giving your body that signal to grow. And that's why it's not as simple as just add weight and reps every single week. If your form is lacking because of that, or you're not controlling the weight anymore, you're not getting that progressive tension. So you want to make sure execution stays good while you learn to train really hard. The glutes are the biggest muscle. They are the biggest muscle in the body and they can lift a lot, okay? So if you're doing, I don't know, dumbbell RDLs with 5 kilo dumbbells, nothing is going to happen. I guarantee you nothing is going to happen. They can lift so much more than that. It is completely feasible for most women to hip thrust 1.5 times their body weight, or to deadlift their body weight, or even actually deadlift 1.5 times their body weight, even squat their body weight. These are things that like most women can build up to, and if you do that, you will probably have crazy glutes. But stop underestimating how hard you train. It's my number one comment on clients' form videos is you had more. You can do heavier or you can do more weight. Like I said, that last rep should be slowing down involuntarily, okay? It hurts, right? Training close to failure fucking hurts. Let's get that out of the way. But it's also safe. It's a safe pain. Like, you will be fine. You'll be fine. Again, a big reason a lot of women hold themselves back from training heavy is they think they're going to get bulky. That's not going to happen, okay? The reason most people are bulky is because they're carrying too much body fat. I'm sorry, we have to say it. I have been training my ass off for 10 years and I take drugs and I'm still not, I wouldn't call myself bulky. It's not going to happen. I look bulky when I've got a lot of fat on me. Funny enough, when I get leaner, I don't look bulky at all. You are not going to get bulky from lifting heavy weights. You are going to grow the muscle that you want to have that toned look that you want. So I want you to start setting some big goals for your lifts. Like, look at your training program and go, okay, what do I want to hit? Like in the next few months, what weights do I want to hit? And they should be goals that fucking scare you. Okay. Like I said, you kind of should be going into the gym just like a little bit anxious about what you have to do, because that means you are pushing yourself enough to probably grow. Next problem that you probably have, and why you're not growing, problem number 4, is you're doing random workouts, or you're just changing your program way too much for no reason. I'm going to say it now. You don't need to change your program every 4 to 6 weeks. You do not need to shock the muscle with new training sessions. No, okay? First of all, this is what always gets me with this. There's not enough exercise in the world to do that, okay? There's only so many exercises that suit you as an individual and that you can progress. When you find the exercise that suit you, why would you just change them for the sake of it? You need to understand this about lifting. Lifting is a skill. The ability for your brain to tell your muscles to coordinate certain lifts and carry out those reps, it's a skill. How do we improve skills? We do them again and again and again. When you start a program and you start doing exercises, the first few weeks, you're just learning how to do that exercise. A lot of the adaptation that we experience is neural. It's your brain learning how to do the exercise. It's not muscular. You're not getting close to failure because you haven't learned how to do the exercise yet properly. So let's say you take 4 weeks to really learn how to do an exercise. Now you've got it nailed. Next week, your program changes. You are losing out on so much time that you could be progressing the weight and the reps of that exercise and actually getting stimulus from it to grow. If you find movements that suit you well, you get a good connection with, you feel stable in, why would you just change them? And why would you change it to an exercise that doesn't feel as good? It just doesn't make any sense. And you might see, I used to follow, all the influencers back in like 2015, right? They would post their swipe workouts. I would do the swipe workout. And then they'd post another one. I'd do the next one. And I was never making any progress because every single time I was doing a new program or a new exercise or a new session, I was having to figure out the weights that I was using, having to learn how to do the exercise, like how draining. And also, guys, you might have used, certain apps or programs that do change every 4 to 6 weeks. And here's what I ask you. Are they subscription based? Are you having to pay every single month for it? If so, why do you think they're changing it every 4 to 6 weeks? So that you keep paying them. Okay? It's nothing to do with that it needs to change. It's the fact that that's their business model. Their business model is you pay them every 4 weeks for a new program. So why would they not change the program? It is not the best way to make gains. I will run programs for, no joke, a year and a half, 2 years in some cases, but I might swap specific exercises if it plateaus, if I just feel like I haven't been getting on with it so well for a while. I might change my volume, I might add sets, take away sets based on my recovery, but the core base of that program, once I have found the movements that fucking work for me, I stick with them for as long as I can. I'm constantly resetting, I might find that I progressed it too quickly, I've gotten a bit carried away, ego lifting a little bit, so then I bring it back, I reset, I go again. There is just no need to be constantly changing things up. Like I said, you're not going to shock the muscle. None of that's going to happen. And look, if you're listening to me going, that sounds so boring, doing the same program for that long, guess what? Building muscle is boring. It is boring. Bodybuilding is boring. Building muscle is boring. You have to do the same shit again and again and again. And that's not sexy. I can't sell that. I can't package that up and sell that. So that's why the people who are selling stuff, they're making it sound like it's something that it's not. If you the best bodybuilders, honestly, are the ones who just do the same shit again and again and again. And yeah, it's not very attractive and it is monotonous, but you can make it exciting by always being a master of your craft, challenging yourself to, progress, add weight, add reps, constantly be evaluating your training. Are you still training properly? Is your execution still good? Like I said, I might be doing an exercise for months and suddenly I feel like it just clicks, or I really refine it. There's exercises I do now that I was doing a year ago and I feel them so much more now because I kept doing them for a year. Okay? So you need to stop having the attention span of a flea and do the same thing for months and months and months and months and months on end, and you might actually make some progress. And that's where it is. There's a difference between, just going to the gym, working out for enjoyment and actually training. Training is different. Training requires patience, consistency, and like I said, just keeping on. Okay, problem number 5. We're moving away from training now. We have to talk about nutrition, and we have to talk about the fact that you keep fucking dieting and you are scared to commit to the bulk. You are not going to grow any fucking muscle, okay, unless you are a complete beginner or very overweight or using performance enhancing drugs, or coming back from an injury. Those are the 4 things. Those are the 4 scenarios where you might grow muscle in a deficit. Aside from that, if you're a girl who's been training for a year or 2, you've got a decent level of muscle mass, if you keep going into deficits and dieting, you're not going to grow. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, okay? Your body needs a surplus of calories and a surplus of amino acids in order to build muscle and to grow, and for you to be able to recover and perform at your best. Like, this is the biggest one because, and I get it, right? Gaining weight is scary, committing to being in a surplus is scary, but it is so fucking worth it because you will actually get the results that you want. Anybody who has big glutes, I'm telling you now, they do not build them by eating 1200 calories a day. You can build muscle close to maintenance, yes, okay? It's going to take you a long time. It's going to take you a long time. It could take you 2 or 3 years, or you could commit to being in a small surplus. It doesn't have to be crazy, like 1 to 200 calories. A small surplus for 6 or 7 months, and you will see huge differences. And look, I've made videos, you know, I have vlogs on my channel about, you know, bulking season mentality and how to make yourself feel good in a gaining phase. But I think the biggest thing is just knowing that you can feel good, but on the other side of the potential discomfort of a little bit of fat gain is having a massive ass, and then the next time you diet you see huge changes. But if you and you have to commit to this for, you know, time. If you're doing fucking 6 to 12 week bulks, nothing's happening. It takes so much longer than that to build muscle. So if you're constantly hopping in and out of diets, not letting yourself gain weight, trying to stay lean, you are not going to be building muscle, and your glutes are just not, they're not gonna reach their full potential. You are holding them back from reaching their full potential. How could you? How could you? Let them grow, let them flourish. Tell me, eat food, eat good food, eat in a small surplus, train fucking hard. Like, it's so simple. It's so simple when it comes to building muscle, but people overcomplicate it and they don't put themselves in the correct environment in order to grow. Again, we need to also be eating enough protein, hitting about a gram per pound of body weight per day. Ideally, I would split that across 3 to 5 meals in a day, making sure you're going into your sessions fueled, pre and post workout nutrition. Again, this is all stuff I can talk about in other videos, but you just have to make sure you're actually fueling yourself properly, okay? Any of my clients who have built the craziest glutes and have seen the most progress, they are the ones who have committed to building phases and committed to surpluses. I have, obviously, the most amount of progress I've ever made has been through all of my building phases, right? Right now, my glutes are the biggest they've ever been. I've also spent since May in a surplus, and I know when I diet they are going to be the biggest they've ever been in a diet because I will have spent this time in a surplus building them. All right, and the final problem, the final reason that you're not really seeing your glutes grow is you're just fucking impatient. You're impatient. You think you're going to see changes in a month to 2 months, and it just doesn't happen, okay? It takes time to build muscle. Like I said in that last point, like, you should be spending 6 to 7 months in a surplus. And you know what? You're probably not going to do one surplus phase and have, you know, the body of your dreams. I've been doing this, I've been in this game for probably doing the whole bulking cutting cycle thing for 5 to 6 months. 5 to 6 months? For 5 to 6 years. It's been a long time, okay? And I'm still not at my final form. I'm still not where I want to be. It's a pursuit that is going to take you probably years, but the time is going to pass anyway. The time will pass regardless, and you get to decide if by the end of that time passing you look better or you look the exact same. If you want to keep spinning your wheels, staying in deficits, not committing to things, you'll look the same in 5 years. But you could kind of accept that it's going to take the time and look at the enjoyment of the process and the enjoyment of the journey. That is the ultimate thing, okay? Because it is all about the daily actions that you take. You know, today, can you train? Can you recover well? Can you get some good sleep? Can you eat well? Can you do that and then accumulate enough of those days over time? If so, you are going to be in a completely different position in a year's time, okay? But it's the people who think they're going to see crazy gains in a really short space of time that they end up deflated and defeated, and then they tell themselves that the process doesn't work or they just can't build muscle, but they've never really given themselves that opportunity and that time. And building muscle is so not gratifying. You know, even being in a deficit, being in a fat loss phase, you see changes. I mean, every week, if not every 2 to 3 weeks, right? You see yourself getting leaner. It's really satisfying. Building muscle is the ultimate test of delayed gratification, because you are not going to see the changes for months. You probably won't see the changes until you diet the next time, because That's when you'll reveal the muscle, you'll strip off the fat, but you'll only get to that point where you can see the changes if you take the time now and spend the months now, you know, just stacking those good days, those good progressions on top of each other. I said it before, it's boring. It's so boring. It's boring. There's a reason you don't see 6-week muscle building challenges, because you can't do it. It's not happening. It's not happening, okay? Not for anybody who's in any way advanced. You know, okay, if someone's building a lot of muscle in fucking 6 weeks, I can tell you now they're running a cycle of something, okay? It's just not how it works. So be willing to play the long game. Be willing to take the time. Because if you are, you might actually get somewhere and you might actually see that progress that you want to see. So if you are in a surplus right now, aim to stay in it for as long as you possibly can, okay? And enjoy it, embrace the phase, embrace the weight gain, and understand that it is going to make such a difference in the future and when you do diet again. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. That kind of wraps it up. You know, we've touched on the different exercises you probably want to have within your program. We've touched on, you know, what you're potentially doing wrong, why you're not seeing results. So yeah, if you did enjoy it, again, don't forget to subscribe, like, comment down below, share it with a friend. I do actually have a completely free booty building Bible, which I'm going to link down below, that you can download, which has, again, a lot of this information in it, but it also has sample workouts in there. It's completely free, and I just want to spread the good glute love. That's what I want to spread. Obviously, I am a coach, and if you want that more one-to-one help, you can sign up with me, or you can sign up with one of the coaches who is working under me. But, you know, if you just want to get a good start and learn a bit more about like how to build muscle and get the most from your training, you can check out the Booty Building Bible down below. But yeah, thank you for sitting through this one. I will catch you in the next one. If you've got any requests for anything that you want to see, of course, let me know. And I will chat to you soon. See ya.